Howdy. This video is for our course EHRD 658, Writing Literature Reviews for Empirical Research in Education. This video supports the final paper for our course, which is creating a systematic literature review worth 200 points. The objective of this video is to review two criteria for the final paper, specifically the methods and the findings. So let's begin with a discussion about the methods. This section of your final paper is worth 20 out of 200 points. And so per the checklist that I provided online for all students to review, you are to describe what databases that are used, what keywords that are used, how many publications generated from your literature search, and how many publications you have included for the final analysis, what screening criteria were used, and what methods were used for data analysis. You have already developed this section in your progress report, so you just need to make sure that you present the final paper that incorporates all of the feedback. Now, we want you to also be mindful that you want to be careful in terms of how much you detail. You want to make sure that your final paper is respectful of the page limit. So there is a such thing as creating a kind of balance in your paper. So give the detail. Do not try to be verbose, but at the same time, you have to give enough detail to be understood. So let's take a look at one of the requirements for charting your data and making sure that as your instructor, I can see all of the data that you have collected. Remember that you all have created your own individualized data management plan. You've been charting your data, you've been coding it, you've been theming it. And as the instructor for evaluation purposes, I want to see how you got to your themes. So in your method section, that's a good place to talk about your analysis. Some of you may want to move that analysis to your findings. Either location is perfectly acceptable. But as a requirement for your paper, I need to see it as your appendix, the ways in which you have collected, charted, managed your data. I need to clearly see how you have arrived at your themes. If you take a look at the example on the screen, this comes from an article that was shared in our course by Weisberg and Dawson. If you remember, Weisberg was our guest speaker on November 30th. And in her systematic literature review, for which she used the PRISMA approach, she landed on 60 relevant articles. And as you can see from her management plan, that those articles were coded, color-coded by their themes, and it's represented in her management of the data. I like to see your version. It doesn't have to look like I should say Ms. Weisberg's information here, but however way you want to represent your themes is absolutely acceptable. I just need to see how you have arrived at your themes per your data. Let's move to the findings. The findings for our final paper, this section of the paper is worth 30 points. And I want you to keep in mind when it comes to findings, your findings should represent sort of the analysis portion of all the great work that you've been doing. And it should be divided into two ways, right? So think of the findings in terms of how do you represent your data, in this case, the literature, numerically, right? And also how do you represent the findings in sort of narrative form. So you have that as your charge, showing your data in numbers and showing your data in narrative. So per the checklist, this is what we're looking for. This is the section where you have synthesized the research articles, you have analyzed and present those major themes. You have already presented some preliminary findings in your progress report. So what you include here should be an extension of your previous effort. You do not need to use the word key findings. I recommend that you use the word just findings or the words results as the section heading. And so depending on the nature of your findings, you can be creative regarding the way that you report the data. So we want you to make sure that I see like a form of some kind of data table or chart where we get to, as a reader, instantly understand where you landed with your final, right, the final representation of those articles. It's also important that you have a kind of robust discussion section for each theme as well. This is the section where you offer your own interpretation and critique. So merely repeating what you present in the above section is not acceptable. So not only are you having your findings, but it's important that you talk about the discussion and the implications as well. So let's take a look at a numerical representation of the data. And this comes from the shared article by Weisberg and Dawson in our course. On the left, you see how Weisberg and Dawson talk about the number of studies, in this case by origin, right? So the pair note that out of the 60 articles, 50 of them were from the US and 4 of them were from Canada, 2 of them were from Brazil. I'm not expecting you to represent your data based on the country of origin. Your data is based on whatever qualifiers, right, or identifiers that you created when you began your search. That is totally up to you. I love how the pair on the right, they give you that visual representation in a table or figure. And per our instructions, each student in our course is required to provide at least one table figure to represent your data, i.e. your literature. So you see here on the right what the authors have done in the far left column. They've organized all of the data, i.e. the articles based on the instructional strategies, the number of articles that fit that particular area. If you see that next column is based on the definitions, that means that all 14 of those articles had definitions related to authentic learning. And then the far right column is based on applications of technology. We have to remember that when we are conducting a systematic literature review, our literature is the data, and we have to show our data in one way numerically. We also need to make sure that we add our voice in analyzing the data. And this is where we get to do what we talked about in class, that sort of zoom out approach, that zoom approach, and that zoom in approach. And for this, I'm hoping that you all will go in a little deeper and talk about what you see and unpack that article in a way that gives real insight. And you'll notice in the example from our authors, Weisberg and Dawson, they do a really great job of that. You get a sense of what that article was really about, where it took place, how it took place, what was the sort of impact and connection to the overall theme of the article as well. So that's it, everyone. I just wanted to touch base with you all to make sure that you stay focused on the methods and the findings. I appreciate your time. You're going to do well. And please remember to turn your assignment in on time. Good luck.